No child of God should suffer such horror. And the president goes on to say, tonight I call on all civilized nations to join us in seeking the end of the slaughter and the bloodshed in Syria. Joining us now, live from Washington, is Senator Marco Rubio, who put out a supportive statement earlier tonight. Senator, your reaction to the president's actions here?
It was the right decision for a number of reasons. Number one, Assad had signed an agreement not to have chemical weapons. It was an agreement that the Russians and the United States were signatories to and a part of. They also signed the convention not to have weapons, and then they had a UN Security Council and a resolution on them as well. They have violated that, and that therefore there needed to be a consequence for it. Someone needs to enforce it. Russia's not going to enforce it. They're helping them. And therefore, that was number one. Number two, I think it's important to remember there are hundreds of Americans stationed in that region, very near to that place, and this guy's using sarin gas. It could ultimately be used against our own troops, and that cannot be allowed to stand. So it is in our national security interest. Number three, I hear a lot of talk, and I'm not saying you, but others, about, oh, this is a symbol or a message. It certainly has a messaging component. But he struck a military base that was used not just for chemical attacks, but potentially for future chemical attacks. And so it had a strategic objective that was very clear, and he dedicated the significant resources, 59 Tomahawk missiles, to destroying a particular air base. That is how you conduct military attacks. You have an objective, and you dedicate the resources to achieve it, and the armed forces of the United States, as they always do, did so. So the president had the legal authority to act, the moral authority to act, and quite frankly, the military strategy to be successful at it. It was the right decision that he made.
Yeah, I agree. The Pentagon just put out a statement, Senator. Russian forces were notified in advance of the strike using the established deconfliction line. This is something you know a lot about. Can you explain it?
Well, obviously, there are military-to-military contacts in the region with the Russians and others, and the reason why you do that is not some conspiracy. You know, I've been as tough on all that as anybody else. It's simply because their objective was not to kill anybody. Their objective was to destroy a facility so that they couldn't fight the planes to conduct more attacks. The way that they are using these chemical weapons is they're dropping them from their airplanes, and that is the airfield that they're flying those attacks from. They've conducted chlorine bomb attacks from that airfield, and they conducted the sarin attack from that airfield. And so the objective of this mission was not to kill Russians. It was to destroy an air base so Assad could not use it in the future. And so that is an appropriate thing to do. It has nothing to do with, you know, some sort of nefarious conspiracy theory that some might come up with. It has to do with military involved.
Senator, we'll save the conspiracy theories for the mainstream media because they live and die by them. 8 months of conspiracies with no evidence. But on a serious note, Senator, whenever military action is taken, you have to prepare for potential consequences or the reaction of others. In anticipation of this, what would you say that our military is preparing for at this very moment in terms of Syria's reaction and in terms of Russia's reaction?
Well, first is the potential targeting of our troops in Iraq and in Syria. That's number one. That's the first thing I would anticipate. The other is some sort of Russian stepping up their air campaign on the ground against elements on the ground. Of course, they've done a significant amount already. But I also think that the consequences of not acting would have been very severe. Not acting would have probably led to more chemical attacks. They could have inadvertently at some point even targeted American troops or American interests in the region with sarin gas. The other point that I would make with regards to all of this and what was going on there was someone, at the end of the day, what is the point of all these resolutions and all these agreements that the United States is signing on to? Because people forget, but back in 2013, 2014, the Russians and the United States entered into this agreement that the Syrians were not going to have chemical weapons. They have chemical weapons. They've been using chlorine bombs, and now they use sarin again. And this is nothing but legally an effort to enforce those requirements. The Russians aren't going to enforce it. They're helping them. This was important tonight to be done. And can I say one more thing, Sean? I think it was evident yesterday. Anybody who saw that press conference, the president standing next to the King of Jordan, he was deeply moved by what he saw and what he was exposed to. And I think that's
tonight as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, and that is something that can't be ignored. I said that earlier today. He clearly was impacted by it. And I think that that's an important consideration here as well.
Let me ask one last question on Russia, which has been supporting and propping up and assisting the Assad regime. Rex Tillerson, our Secretary of State, called out Russia earlier, saying they failed in their responsibility to deliver on their commitments, especially as it relates to these weapons, and either Russia has been complicit or incompetent in delivering that end of the agreement. That, to me, is a clear sign that this administration was willing to take on any consequences as it relates to both Syria and Russia. And I also think the big message here tonight and the takeaway tonight is this is a message to the world that they want to prevent any further mass casualty of civilians. And I would say the message is that's non-negotiable. Is that how you interpret that?
Well, obviously, look, I think the objective tonight was the destruction of that air base. But if you want to know who's getting a message tonight in regards to all this, I think if you're in North Korea, you see this tonight and you start to wonder whether these are people you want to be messing with. I think if you're Iran, you're starting to think about whether these are people you want to be messing with. And obviously, I think if you're Bashar al-Assad and Vladimir Putin, you realize that things have changed. And that if, in fact, there are things that you are doing that are against the national security interests of the United States, we're not going to spend 2 weeks looking for some letter. There's going to be action to protect our interests. That's a big change from what we've had over the last 8 years.
Senator, thank you for your time tonight. We appreciate it. Joining us now is